so many journeys within her life journey. She joined in 1987 the Indian Administrative Service, post which she's held several roles. Currently, she is the Additional Chief Secretary with the Government of Karnataka, handling several portfolios. Along with this, she is also she's a doctorate. She's undertaken her PhD at the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore, and has also been at IIT Chennai. Ma'am has also been on several boards, such as the Akshay Patra Foundation, the Ashoka Innovators for Public Policy, the Bangalore Women Forum, to name a few. Along with that, she has also undertaken and trained in evidence for policy design at the Center for International Development at Harvard. She's looked at e-governance strategies at LSE, and has also been part of the Advanced Women's Leadership program at the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago. This is just to name a few out of the many things that ma'am has accomplished. So thank you once again for joining us, ma'am. And, I can pull out the presentation and we can start.
Yeah. Thank you, Vanshika, for that very long introduction. Thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you for accommodating me, because I was scheduled to speak to you on International Women's Day. I could not make it. Thank you all for being so patient with me. Every year, we celebrate Women's Day with a lot of enthusiasm, bonhomie, and fanfare. And I am usually lucky to be invited by some organization or institute or university to celebrate Women's Day with them, where I get to meet capable and talented women. I count myself fortunate to be among you all this evening, sharing this special day, a day that gives a voice to our struggles and our stories. Can we begin the presentation, Vanshika?
Yes, ma'am. I hope the slide is visible now.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah. We can go to the next slide. I must begin with a confession. When I am invited to events of this kind, where I am asked to share some pearls of wisdom and provide some takeaways to the audience, it always makes me quite nervous. What special wisdom do I have? I have certainly not found any magic mantra to attain the mythical work-life balance or personal cum professional growth, or a way to correct gender imbalance. There is this illusion that somehow the speaker has found all the answers, and the expectation is that all that knowledge will be crystallized and shared in a 5 or 7 minute speech. Well, I cannot do that. But what I can do is to share a few thoughts with you. Next slide. Let me ask you a question. Do you want it all? Loving daughter, fond sister, caring mother, supportive spouse, dynamic career woman. We would like to be all these things. We would, each one of us, like to have it all. Well, this is what having it all looks like. In the very least, having it all, doing it all, will give you severe indigestion. At worst, you may end up with a nervous breakdown. Next, please. In my work in the government or my voluntary work outside it, I get to interact with women who inspire with their stories of determination, challenge, and survival. One thing I find common among these women is their authenticity. These women are not seeking money or fame or power. They are not looking at what their neighbor or their co-worker has. They are busy living their own life. They do not waste time in petty rivalries or envy or bad-mouthing someone else. Their days are full with balancing their own joys, disappointments, and chores, and ticking their many, many lists. So, when you ask me to speak of becoming better by balance, it is best that I give you my own example or the example of women that I know. Next, please. I have been a working woman since the day I got out of college. If there's one thing I have learned, it is that balance is an elusive goal. And it is not just a woman's issue, but a general issue for all of us. When I was younger, I thought that the solution was to structure and organize my life so efficiently that I could achieve work-life balance and have it all, so to speak. But how do you organize your life when so many externalities impinge on it? I was scheduled to speak to you on the 8th. I could not make it, and that delay was not of my own making. I traveled to Belgaum last week. I had to change my tickets thrice, and none of the changes were of my making. So, when as a woman, you ask for your place in the sun, you are facing externalities and a legacy of differentiation and discrimination far more powerful and insidious than a traffic jam or cancelled air tickets. What many of us have experienced in our daily lives. If we are silent, we are ignored. If we speak up, we are looked askance at, or everyone suddenly goes deaf. The less attractive assignments are given to women. Our roles as wife, mother, our dressing styles are fodder for gossip. These are now not just one woman's experience, but the stuff of women's lore. Every year, on International Women's Day and in women empowerment programs, we hear the same conversations about the importance of advancing women in the workplace. But the tactics feel increasingly stale. Let's face it, the pace of change for getting more women into leadership roles is glacial. This is stunningly disappointing because the economic benefits of gender parity, from stronger business outcomes and higher GDP to more growth and innovation, have been proven time and again. Those of us who are lucky enough to work for the government and the public sector do not face overt disparity in pay or seniority, but we do face discrimination of a subtler nature. Next, please. So, how can one find balance in an age of ethos and ethos of imbalance? As for me, I generally ignore the biases and carry on regardless. Moreover, as I move higher up the ladder, the kind of issues that I face as a professional are not very different from those that my male colleagues face. So, somewhere along the line, I stopped precision engineering my day and my career and tried to be flexible instead, not sweat the small stuff. And it works. At least it works for the day-to-day. Those days when you have to stay late late in the office or your maid disappears when life hits you with a sledgehammer. My cousin is a doctor. Her life shattered when her husband met with an accident which confined him to a wheelchair for life. Anu, a hairdresser that I have known for many years now, came to Bangalore from Darjeeling seeking a livelihood. She found a livelihood in my city and love. Her serene life was shattered when her husband was diagnosed with cancer. After months of pain and tension, she lost him. You can't adjust. You can't juggle. There are some struggles and situations where all you can do is to hold fast to whatever strength is within you. Keep your head above water. Just go. Where I am now, I just go with the flow. Rather than searching for balance, I seek the best from any situation and do the best I can in every opportunity. And when I can't, I cut myself some slack and tackle my tasks with renewed enthusiasm. Some things that I have done, some choices that I have made have helped. And it is these that I offer as simple takeaways. Next, please. 1. Invest in yourself. It could be health, fitness, nutrition, pursuing a degree, reading, or having a financial nest egg. Your mind and body and mutual funds will stand you instead when life gets difficult. Next, please. 2. Build a support network. Ask for help and allow yourself to be helped and contributed to. Get your family involved. Work together as a team. Train yourself and your children and partner and your subordinates to be self-reliant. One of the best decisions I took was to let everyone in the family cook, much to the shock of my mother and mother-in-law. But now I can rest easy that wherever they are, my kids can fix a meal for themselves without the assistance of Zomato or Swiggy. Recruit friends, family, neighbors, bosses, work colleagues, ask for their support. Grandparents, of course, are the staple of the Indian family support system. Be prepared by creating backup and emergency plans. Always be ready for a contingency. Next, please. 3rd, determine your own standards. Get rid of the notion of being a perfectionist. Wean yourself off it by making compromises. Figure out the best places to make those compromises without shortchanging yourself. Live by your own standards rather than someone else's. Standards are about you and refer to the behavior and actions that you are willing to hold yourself to. Find your own pace and walk to it. March to the beat of your own drum. Next, please. 4th, find an interest or several. The working world has its share of frustrations and disappointments. You need something to keep you in good stead. For me, it is academics, but it could be anything: voluntary work, designing, photography, spirituality. Seize opportunities with both hands. Whether it is travel, assignment, or just a chance to meet someone, every opportunity adds value, helps you grow. The most rewarding opportunity of all is to help someone who is less privileged than you are. Next, please. This is not the kind of charity where you send or contribute some money and forget about it, but the kind where you actively involve, engage, and make a difference to someone, even one person's life. This woman is like you, but for the accident, of your respective birth locations. She multitasks, so do you. But you have a choice. You are employed by an employer who allows you to go on maternity leave and limits your working hours to 8 a day. She has no such choices, no such protection. If you can make a difference to her life, please do. Next, please. Let go of all guilt, all bitterness. Guilt is a great waste of emotional energy. It causes you to become immobilized in the present because you are dwelling in the past. Guilt can be debilitating. By introducing logic to help counterbalance the guilt, you can avoid sabotaging your own efforts and stay better on course. Life treats all equally. Life compensates. Instead of blaming someone else, take control of your life and make choices around it. And thereafter, own the consequences. Be happy. This life is only for once. I would like to add one more thing. Faith helps. Faith in yourself, in those close to you, and in God or the universe. It especially helps in those sledgehammer times that I spoke about. You will remember that Coorg district in Karnataka was devastated by floods in 2008. It happened in Kerala, and at the same time it happened in Coorg as well. I was district secretary of Coorg at that time. What I saw was a people who refused to break down. Their cheer, their confidence, their courage was intact even as they saw their homes and lands vanish before their eyes. There are times when there is no formula, no solution. There is just you. And you, I know for sure, will find your own way, your own balance for a better life. Thank you, and fly free. Last slide. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that very insightful presentation and touching upon so many key points. I think as we progress in the conversation, I'll try and weave in those concepts and would love to hear more detailed thoughts on some of them. I'd like to start off by asking you that, as somebody who's had a professional career for 3 decades now, if you could walk us through some key inflection points in your life where you really felt that they were really hard choices, and that those choices were particularly difficult for you because you were a woman, and probably your male counterparts did not have to give that much mental time, space, energy for being in the similar space or place.
By and large, Vanshika, my life has been a kind of a mix of choices and chance. Okay, so many things have happened with serendipity. Even my entering the civil service was one such. There's been no definite choice that I made. I'll narrate how. But there was one choice much before I started my career, which really determined the course of my life. At that time, I was about 18 years old. I was a student. I was doing my BA at that time, and I was studying for my BA finals. Now, my family has always emphasized the importance of education. My parents, my grandparents, they all encouraged me to study. But when I was around 18 and preparing for my BA final year exams, one of my uncles decided that it was time for me to get married. And to my horror, my parents, who throughout had insisted on study and marks, and I was a very good student too. They there was this deference to elders, which was also part of our family ethos. So when an elder in the family said it's time for her to get married, they just buckled and they said that, yes, we'll get her married now. And I was horrified. And I remember that I used to be studying in my room for the exams, and I used to dart out and plead and cajole and I don't know what else, cry. I have to do my MA. I have to do my MA. And it appears very trivial to you at that time, but at 30, 35 years ago, that was my horizon. I could not conceive of a life without a master's. Yeah, and it worked happily for me. And this was, I hardly had confrontations with my parents. So this was one confrontation that I remember. And finally they did agree. And I did get to finish my BA and then my MA, and then I did 2 more master's degrees, and then I did a PhD. And in the course of that, I also wrote the CSC and got into the IAS. So this was, one choice that I remember, which really determined the course of my life later. So the IAS itself happened by chance, just to complete that choice chance paradigm. I wanted to, I drifted into academics because I was a good student. I joined IIT Madras to do a PhD. I topped their entrance examination, but I found that I could not find a guide who could guide me correctly in my own area of interest. And therefore, the fallback option was the IAS, and that is how I wrote, which was partly chance. So that is the way. Now coming to there are many, this thing which you asked, that was it more difficult for me than for the men around? It happens all the time. In public service, you are not really having, you don't have to, struggle for equal pay. We get the same benefits, we get the same remuneration as our male colleagues. The discrimination is more insidious. It happens perhaps in meetings where you give a suggestion and it will not be listened to, but later on somebody would, float the same idea, take the credit for it and do it. Those kind of things happen. Your postings will be relatively less important, so to say, than a posting which a male colleague would get. But that said, public service offers wonderful opportunities everywhere. Even where I have been in so-called bad postings or punishment postings, as they are called, I have taken interest, done very well. One such was when maybe about 20 years ago, I was a young officer, got into some kind of tiff with some political bosses, and I was put in what was called the Directorate of Mass Education. Basically, it deals with adult and non-formal education. But education was an area which interested me. I embraced it with a passion, did so well, brought a lot of funding and opened many continuing education centers, that is adult education centers in my state. And to crown it all, won the NLM, National Literacy Mission UNESCO Award that year. So, this happens all the time. It happens in a very insidious way. I don't try to keep it in my mind at all. I just take it in my stride and move forward.
Right. Thank you for those wonderful anecdotes.
Very, very long answer to your question.
But those were lovely anecdotes which really brought to life, your experiences. I wanted to follow up to what you said with a question on your experience in the field vis-a-vis at probably the state capital level or the national level, because so with the civil services, in particular the administrative service, and for those who don't know, the structure is very unique, and I think even in today's day and age, very few spaces give that opportunity, right, to kind of be in the field and then kind of be part of policy execution and policy formulation. So if you could tell us your experience there, because again, a lot of people still feel that roles or jobs which require more hours on the ground is something that, say, many females may not be that comfortable with,
Yeah,
or that there are many more challenges, which may not be the case, but that perception unfortunately still exists. So how has your experience been? What were the opportunities and challenges like?
yeah. Um, Let me just very briefly say how the structure is. It's an evolutionary vertical, that when you join the service, you spend roughly the first 10 years of your service in the field. This could be, you start as subdivisional magistrate, then you become project director or a commissioner of a corporation, and then you become what is called the chief executive officer. In my state, it is called chief executive officer of the Zilla Panchayat. So that is the local panchayat administration at district level. And then you also work as district collector. So this is the flow of your career, the trajectory of your career in the first 10 years or so, very broadly, 8 to 10 years. Then you move into the state secretariat, and then you are taking the policy making role. And so you are bringing with you all the field experience which you have gained in the first 10 years of your career. And as you become deputy secretary, joint secretary, and then secretary, you are trying to apply those learnings into policy making and formulation. So this is the vertical. Horizontally, we move cross-sectorally. So I myself have worked in multiple departments. As of now, I'm handling 4 departments. I'm handling animal husbandry, fisheries, labor, and public grievances. That is a little unusual, but in any case, every IAS officer moves laterally across several departments. So you get the kind of multi-sectoral experience in the course of your career. So this is broadly the way it works. The field experience which I remember most, and which I think is a privilege for even IAS officers with their multi-sectoral experience, is my posting as the district collector of Udupi. And why this is special was that Udupi was created at that time in the mid-90s. And I was the first district collector of Udupi. So on me fell the task of actually creating that district, which meant that I started with absolutely nothing. In fact, my chief secretary then joked that wherever you stand, that is the district. Because I was there and there was normally district collectors have a lot of paraphernalia. But I had to create my office. I had to find the space. So everything I did. But it was a wonderful experience because the barriers which are usually there between the bureaucrats and the politicians just faded away. And I lost you for a second, sir. Was there a problem? Yeah.
I think your video might be on. If you could put your video on again, because I think I can see myself, but I think we've lost your video, unless you're experiencing the same thing. You're back now. You're back.
Yeah, same thing happened to me. I think it's better I use the system video. This doesn't. If you're able to see me, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Then it's. So that was a great experience, and I worked hand in hand with politicians. And Udupi district is famous for academic institutions as well as non-governmental organizations. And many a time there would be a lot of disagreement, but we all work together to make the district, stand on its own feet, so to speak. And today I take a great deal of pride because when I go back to the district, they all remember the work that I did. And in fact, one citizen came to me on one of my visits, which I made about 3 or 4 years ago. And he came and told me, please just compare. You would have gone to the other, at the same time when Udupi was created, there were other five or six other new districts created. None of them have progressed as well as Udupi. And he came to me and said, you laid a foundation with a good heart. And therefore, this district has progressed so much. So that is the real satisfaction that you get, that what you do in the field gets remembered forever. And what you do in the field enriches your other work also. So a kind of my academic work gives a macro perspective, but my work as an IAS officer or a volunteer gives me that grassroots experience, and they kind of enrich each other.
Right. Thank you once again for that very enriching answer again with lovely anecdotes. And I think I'm sure everybody's going to really enjoy this. I think understanding more granular kind of experiences. To that point, I'm actually curious to know that you made the point about how 30 years back when you were doing your bachelor's, for you and your horizon, doing a master's was what you looked at, right? And now, of course, I mean, 30 years later, we are, as a country, as a society, we've also moved much more ahead, where girls across different socioeconomic groups are dreaming bigger and better. But along with that, I mean, as studies have shown and continue showing, that while academically and in educational institutions, girls are doing well, are doing better than the boys, at entry level, more and more girls are coming in. But then as they move up the ladder or across then different life stages, we see that the dropout rate is still high. And of course, this could be at the fact that, say, once they decide to have a family or children or so on and so forth. And therefore, still, at present, India's female labor force, the participation rate is still a dismal 27%. And that is even among a lot of educated, demographic groups. So what would be your advice for women and girls to develop and, sustain careers across time and space? Like long-term careers, and not just short, recent working stints.
And it is also such a terrible waste of an education, isn't it? That, you spend all those years to gain an education. See, that said, it is not that women ever stop working or even ever stop contributing to the nation building as a whole, because they are contributing in some way as a mother or a wife or a homemaker. But for those who want to pursue a continuous career, an external career, so to speak, outside the home, I think it is, you said 27%, the unorganized sector, it must be a little more. But the thing is, the structures the organizational structures which we presently follow make it more difficult. But what I saw with COVID was that we were shifting for almost a year or little less than a year to different other modes of working, which are more flexible and more easy to juggle. Work from home, for instance. If we move out of these organizational barriers, and what I see happening is that each of us would become used to becoming a freelancer. We would develop our particular expertise, move into a team on a particular assignment or a job, complete it, and then move out and move on to the next job or assignment. Now that is happening, but it's still happening within the structural boundaries of a company or a corporation. I think it's going to become more flexible than that. And that is actually good news. Though it does mean that, a lot of people will be frightened, saying that job security will go. But my son, for instance, my son is a neurosurgeon, and he is attached to one hospital, which, pays him his salary and remuneration, and bulk of his work is done there. But he also consults with other hospitals, and he's getting remunerated by several of them. Maybe he goes and does a surgery in some other hospital other than the one he's working. The way the medical profession is structured, it allows for that kind of movement. And in fact, that is how they learn. They do not do their work within the boundaries of the same city or the same hospital. They move across. And the only restriction is convenience. And they are getting paid. Their expertise is being peddled across several hospitals, and they are getting paid by them, by all of them. And I think that is what is going to happen with all of us, most of us professionals. We have to shed that idea of having a permanent job in a permanent place, and learn to move across organizations, peddling our expertise. And that will make it much easier for women, because then they can pick and choose the assignments they want to do, and also the time which they want to spend. It makes it much easier to juggle. So within the confines of an organizational structure, the only way is to diversify, gain more experience, if that is your choice, that you want to get more experience within that particular field. But I see the future opening up, and in a very short time, my own belief is that we'll have a nation of freelancers.
So that's a very critical point that you actually made, that going forward, just the nature and the future of work itself is going to be so different, and that requires all of us, especially younger people, to be very agile, to showcase and develop the ability to skill, reskill, to learn, unlearn. That is going to be pivotal. What are some ways that you think women in particular should focus on building agility skills, skills that make them more, that give greater dexterity, more transferable skills and knowledge? Any particular suggestions, advice on that front?
See, in a general way, and I cannot say this of every woman, because there are obviously those who have crossed that kind of mental or social barrier. But there are, by and large, a very simple thing: information. Women tend to seek information from their friends or their neighbors, or someone's sister. There is a host of information which is available on public sources. Internet is the best source. There are let's say a startup. There are so many women coming to me and saying, I want to do a business. Now, how does government help? No, that information is available for you. It's right there, splashed across your screen. But they would rather ask it from someone they know. So the first thing is to go out of that and try to seek information from the appropriate sources, where you will get accurate information. It's a very simple thing, but I find that very, very many women have won the comfort of knowing it from someone whom they know. So this is one. You also, as you said, need to develop that agility. We all need to. It's not just women. For me, at this stage, I'm not able to see women's problems as different, or women's issues as different from others. There are, areas where there is a specific discrimination, but by and large, everyone has to learn to be able to switch across boundaries, switch across organizations, use their expertise in different contexts. Our education system doesn't prepare us for that. Engineers study with engineers, interact with engineers, doctors with doctors, history students with history students, I assume. But we need to be able to work in teams. Now, think of COVID, for example. You had medical decisions, and I used to be part of these deliberations. You have decisions, public health and community medicine decisions being taken by groups of doctors and administrators, which then had to be implemented in the field by ASHA workers. Again, it goes and comes by ASHA workers or policemen, you see, or marshals from the municipal corporations. So those decisions need to be understood. And in the same way, the information or feedback which was being collected by these workers from the field, by the nurses or the doctors who are actually treating the patients, those who are administering the medicines or giving the treatment, that feedback need to flow upwards so that the correct decisions could be taken. What I found was a lot was being lost in translation, because we were collecting humongous amounts of data from all of them. Partly it is because we don't speak the same vocabulary. The lingo which I use as a doctor cannot be understood by, let us say, a nurse a nurse may still understand, but let us say a policeman who were to see that social distance had to be maintained in a queue, for example. So we need to change the way we train our people so that they learn to work in groups or teams. And this is something, that those disciplinary barriers, so to say, that should be raised completely. Only then we will be able to work. And I think a very important part of our training as a nation is to avoid that Tower of Babel kind of situation when each is speaking something and everyone is deaf to the other. And we need to start working in teams. I think that is one way to go. Women have a part to play, but this is across the board. It applies to everybody.
Right. And the point that you made on teams is actually so critical, because I think especially in the Indian context, where, as you mentioned, most of the academic training, for most part, is more individual driven, is more, as opposed to collaborative, and as opposed to honing skills which will kind of be of more use practically.
A little bit more than that. Not only just individual, but it is also discipline driven.
Right.
We completely do not interact with doctors. We speak to doctors in their conferences, engineers with their engineers in their associations, but not an engineer with a history student, or a literature student with a lawyer, for example. So,
right.
That kind of thing.
But I think that hopefully now, I mean, things are changing, and I'm happy to say that as a young person, I personally have had the opportunity to be part of such wonderful intersectional spaces. So, but I have noticed that for most people, say from an engineering background, very silo oriented, very linear, very bracketed, and so on. And for that matter, even people from my own discipline. And unless you're in certain spaces or communities that kind of give you that exposure or access, it's still limited, but things are changing. But that's such a key point that you touched on. Taking that forward, talking about teams, and when you think of teams, you think of management, you think of leadership. I would like to know as an individual and also as a woman, how have you seen your leadership skills and your style crystallize over time? And what, according to you, is the difference between a manager, a leader, a boss, and how do those elements come together?
I think if you're speaking of evolution, maybe over the years I've become kinder. Okay, that kind of sums it up. I'm more patient than I used to be. I still, get flashes of temper, but I cool down very quickly, and I'm able to go on with my work. But most days, and this is really the crux of it, that once I've, gotten ready and I step out of my home, I forget that I'm a woman. The gender hardly ever matters. And my best days as a leader has been when my subordinates forget that I'm a woman. And there have been times, and those are the bestest times, when they forget that I'm their boss. Because we are so focused on the task, we work together, we bond together, and we are so focused. And since you like anecdotes, let me tell you, now everybody is familiar with MSP. I've been dealing with MSP for very long. Today, most of you know that minimum support price. And we were working, I was then in the Food and Civil Supplies Department, and we had to work out an MSP program in Karnataka, where we do statewide collection of ragi, rice, and certain other dhanya, millets, they say. And we were preparing a cabinet note. It has been placed before the cabinet, approval funds got, before we could launch that program. And this was, I think, in the year 2015 or something like that. And generally my style is consultative. So there were about 5 or 6 of us, no, more than that, about 10 or 12 of us crowding around my desktop and preparing that cabinet note, because each had something to say. There were, so each had some contribution to make. So we were all crowding around. That morning, as it happened, I had skipped my breakfast. So I was very hungry. And during as we go, we're preparing the note and discussing, I was becoming hungrier and hungrier. So at some point I said, let's stop and let's have lunch. But no one would stop. Work just went on. And then at intervals, I kept on repeating, let's stop now, let's have lunch and we'll come back and do. And it got to the point that my officer, a deputy director, and I still tease him about it, that he got very annoyed with me. And he said, Madam, I'll tell you in Kannada, because Madam, lunch maadi, now if you want, you go and have lunch, we'll finish the job. And he did it. I said this so rudely, but that was not rudeness really. He was so focused on that, wanted to finish that. It was a very important thing too. And I still, of course, tease him about it, that, you just forgot who I am and you let go. So this happens, that, they do forget. And those are wonderful moments. Working together on a task creates a bond between people. And that you remember forever. Those associations last forever. So from the outside, government looks very boring. But we do work. It is mundane, painstaking and laborious, but it really touches the lives of people. And there are instances, and maybe one of your questions will, I can tell you how the kind of work which we do, which appears very simple to us even, can transform someone else's life. So that happens. So when you talk of leadership, everyone should forget that you are the leader. That is the best leadership of all.
Right, absolutely. I think the point, it is such an important point, which is usually not spoken about, that actually being an anonymous leader. And as you said, at times when everybody's so much in a flow state that the task at hand supersedes everything else, and that one common vision bridges and bonds everyone, is really something which is, you've really hit the nail with that point. To that, and as you finished your answer with the point that, the kind of platform that the services gives to transform someone's life, right? It's said that, I read this wonderful line somewhere, which said that probably the civil services is the only platform that allows you to, or enables you to touch the life of a person from birth to death, right? From addressing something like even supporting with a birth certificate to the entire life cycle of the individual journey. So could you, through your experience, share some anecdotes on some very satisfying experiences of yours working with people?
I'll tell you two such experiences, even at the cost of taking some time. In 2013, I was managing director of Kaveri Handicrafts. Kaveri Handicrafts is the Karnataka Handicrafts Development Corporation. And I had visited Bidar. My officers had taken me to Bidar as part of my field visits. And then they took me to an NGO, which was in the task of making sandalwood products. So we used to buy the sandalwood, because sandalwood is a regulated commodity. So the company purchases the sandalwood, gives it at a decent rate, a little below market rate, but not very subsidized, to sandalwood makers, who then carve out beautiful figures and figurines and artifacts from sandalwood. And so this sandalwood, Bidar is a far-flung district, and we went into that NGO, and I found about 100 or odd women working. Normally, when we visit units, they receive us nicely with a lot of, the reception is good. But this was very warm and really heartfelt. And then the owner of that unit asked me, and his name was Badeppa. He asked me that, do you remember me? And I said, no, I don't know. Then he told me the story that in 1996, so that must be what, some 16, 17 years before that day, I was a director in the Rural Development Department. And he was a young entrepreneur. he had given an application for seed money. We used to give what is called seed money of very small amounts, 10,000, 20,000 rupees, to what is now called startups. Those small units which want to do some work in rural areas. And he had given one such application, and he had traveled from Bidar to meet me to request to sanction that. But even before he reached, I am generally very quick in files. So I had, approved it, sanctioned it, and the order was ready. So he came up to my office. I happened not to be in my office at that time. So my PA told him, your work is already done. Take your order and go your way. You've got your money. So he had taken that order. And with that money, he set up a unit which not only earned him his livelihood, but he gave livelihood for about 150 destitute women who were all in the production. And he had waited for, 15 or 16 years to meet me. And we met that day in 2013. And he told me the story. I didn't remember, because for me, it was just one more case. It was one more, I didn't know what difference that could make. But Badeppa's life had been transformed, and not just his life, but the life of about 100 odd women who were working in his unit. All was impinged upon by that small seed money which I had done in time for him. So this is, one instance. Something much more touching was, I spoke of Coorg in my talk. In 2008, Kerala had, heavy floods. And at the same time, Coorg district in Karnataka was also devastated by floods. And I was district secretary, and I was put in charge of supervision of and relief, rehabilitation and relief of the people. And 1 or 2 days were very tense. The first few days, the rain started on August 15th. I was there on 16th morning. And the first few days were very tense for us because people were stranded. Coorg is known for heavy fog, even in the best of times. So helicopters could not go. They could not see where to put the food packets. So it was a very, very difficult time. And at that time, on 17th morning, on August 17th morning, a small group of young men came to me, and they belonged to the General Timmaiya National Academy of Adventure. And they requested me that allow us to participate in the rescue efforts. Because people were stranded, there were islands surrounded by water. We had already the army working there in all parts of the affected parts. The Navy was on, and the Air Force were on standby. Air Force could not do much because of the heavy fog and heavy lashing rains. Navy could, of course, touch certain parts, but not, because Coorg is basically landlocked. So I'm very skeptical of do-gooders, who don't understand the dangers. And, they are eager to help, but they will put themselves in danger and add to the problem. So I sat with these people, but something, clicked there, and I sat with them, discussed with them for 15, 20 minutes. Then they convinced me that, they are very well trained. And I said, yes, okay, go ahead. But you be the support system to the army. So you'll be the second line of support. Somebody is rescued and brought to you, you bring them to the safe place. And they did that. But they did little more. The Kaveri was in spate, and there was a family with a 2-month-old baby stranded, and Coorg is undulating terrain with small hillocks. So they were stranded in one of those small houses. And these people connected a ropeway and rescued the family with that 2-month-old baby, hugging that baby close. One of the volunteers, he came on the ropeway and rescued that baby. I wish I had the photo. I do have the photograph of that little baby. I wish I had kept it to show you. I didn't think that this question would come. And that was one of those days when I, thank God for making me an IAS officer, because that decision which I took, that not only saved that baby's life and her family, but it became inspirational. The army, the military in general, do not document. They don't photograph what they do. So work was being done, people did not know. But Chetna was a kind of a different entity. The whole rescue effort was documented and it became inspirational. And the video just went viral on TV and the social media, and it inspired so many people, including those in Coorg who had been affected by the floods. So that was one of my great experiences in the service. And that was much later, not when I'm in the field, but quite recently.
Okay. Thank you for sharing another such, one